crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a really interesting conversation, discussion headed your way. Before we get to that and make our introductions, just some ground rules of how things work, just in case this is your first time here. We'd love to have you join our conversation all throughout the program. Ways you can do so at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to give us a call, the text number is area code 205-670-1949. Or you can call us toll-free, 844-LAW-TALK, 844-529-8255. And Hollis Wright makes available attorneys who are standing by live to take your free, confidential, and off-air call. If you just give them a call, they are there waiting for you. To lead tonight's conversation, he's the managing partner of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright.
How are you, my friend?
Good to see you, sir. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Let's do it. You doing well?
I am. How about you?
We had a fabulous week. Everything's good. You know, David, we do a lot of different types of shows. One of the shows that I like the most is a show that we do that relates to issues of wills and trusts, and specifically today, estates. And let me tell you why I like that.
All right.
I like that because the people that sit on the couch and watch this television show on Sunday nights or lay in bed and watch the show on Sunday nights oftentimes don't get little tricks that will allow them to be more efficient in their, for example, estate planning. Mm-hmm. This is a good example show of how we're going to help them and benefit them to make sure that we can give them some tricks, whether it's life insurance, beneficiary distributions of how things go through outside of your estate really, but to a beneficiary that you designate, right. Whether it's establishing it through a will, whether it is a joint tenant, right of survivorship. We're going to talk about that tonight, where if you pass away, but you have someone else on the deed of your house, it's going to transfer to them outside their estate. And so there's some little tricks that we're going to be able to provide today that I think will help us. We're really lucky today because Rodney Davis is with us, who's got a practice here in town that does this. So first of all, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here to talk about this stuff today. So first and first, tell us a little bit about your practice and kind of what you do and how you got into this area of the law.
Well, when I first started practicing, I was, as a lot of other attorneys do, just kind of doing a little bit of everything. And estate planning was just one of those things that just kind of stuck. I enjoyed working with families. I enjoyed, helping families make these kind of decisions because I noticed how, little we do estate planning, and I could see how it affected, our communities. Personally, for my family, I could see how it affected my family when we lost loved ones, and how confusing it was trying to figure out how to handle their assets when they passed. And so I just became really passionate about it over time, and been doing it ever since. Been doing it for a little under 5 years now, and I'm enjoying it. Keep learning more about it, and that's where I'm at now.
We're glad to have you aboard. So let's talk just in general. How do you kind of, when someone says, hey, explain what estate planning is, how do you explain that to them? Kind of what is the process of estate planning?
Estate planning is basically the process of anticipating and deciding how you want your assets to be disposed of when you pass away, as well as certain decisions that you want to be made concerning your health and your business while you're alive if you ever become incapacitated.
Yeah, and I have seen over the last decade a lot of living wills and medical directives that have become kind of popular. Can you just kind of talk in general about what those are and how you can use them for your family members, for your parents, those types of things?
Sure. So a living will, in Alabama, we have what's called an advance directive. And basically what this document is, it's a document where you decide the kind of health care and medical treatment that you want to have if you're ever in a situation where you can't speak for yourself. And so, for example, you get to decide what kind of treatment, what kind of medicine do you want to be given if you're in a coma or if you are terminally ill. Do you want to be fed through a feeding tube? Do you want to be given medicine that would not necessarily heal you but would keep you alive? And so you also get to decide who is going to make decisions regarding your health. And so you get to appoint someone who's going to make those decisions, as well as you decide, what kind of treatment you want to receive.
Yeah. You can see that's almost as important as what happens when someone passes away, what happens to their assets and resources and how they're allocated to a family. It's almost just as important during the time that someone's living, no question.
I'm sure there are many reasons why folks are hesitant to call you and kind of get involved with this. Utmost, maybe the cost. How expensive of a process? Because I think there is this impression that I'm going to have to fork over a whole lot of money to get this, and I can't afford it. I know you're making the case you can't afford not to, but how expensive is the process?
Well, it really varies. It really depends on, what your wishes are and how, complex your estate plan is. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is that actually planning can be a lot less expensive than not planning.
Right.
And so what I mean by that is that when you don't plan, it opens up the door for all types of litigation, all kinds of guesswork where you have to go through the court to have things put into place. And so it's much better financially if you actually do put in a plan rather than not put in a plan. And if you wanted to, I guess, have just a ballpark figure, I've seen plans be done for as little as $300 to $500. And so, of course, as you can imagine, that's a lot less expensive than having to, go through the court system if you don't plan.
I've seen, there's some gray area here, but I've seen two examples in my practice over and over and over again, and that is those individuals who lose a loved one and maybe we're evaluating, for example, a wrongful death case where they did complete estate planning and they handled how to resolve funeral expenses, who was in charge of probating the estate, how that estate was going to be probated, what assets would be in the estate, what assets would not be in the estate, and managed it to where it's so much more efficient and less heartache versus the other side of that, David, which is I've seen many families where none of that was done, and it is a mad scramble to try and determine, all right, how are we going to pay for the funeral? Once the funeral's done, how are we going to resolve the estate issues? What is this concept of probating a will? We have this will over here, but nobody's talked to us about it. And so, the former is much more efficient, and it's a lot less stress on the families, and that's why you get to someone like Rodney.
I lost a family member, as you know, about a year ago, and at that moment, it is such a stressful time. There's so much emotion involved. None of us were really thinking right, So to take care of this ahead of time, it just would save you so much heartache and headache and stress.
Oh, definitely. And I deal with families daily who have just lost a loved one, and it is, like you said, it can be pretty disastrous. People are wondering, how things are going to get paid for, who's going to get what, and not to mention, it never fails. You always have those family members who want to be in control of things, who want to come in and who have ill intentions, and those are some of the most stressful situations, because you're already dealing with losing a loved one. Having to fight with family members just makes the whole situation that much harder.
I know we're getting ready to go to break, but when we come back, I want to talk about, all right, what happens when somebody passes away, how we probate kind of the estate, and then we'll work our way also through some of the tricks of the trade of things you can do to make your estate more efficient and to manage some of the issues Rodney was talking about.
Fantastic. A good start here as we head to break. A quick reminder of how you can stay in touch with the firm of Hollis, Wright. A great educational and informational resource is the way that the firm uses social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find it all over there. Just search Hollis, Wright, and you'll find that there. Again, a good follow if you want to kind of keep up with all things legal and things that will help you. We're stepping aside our first break of the evening. We'll be back right after this quick break.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys. Hollis Wright, car and truck accident attorney, standing by right now to help you.
Hollis Wright is a proud sponsor of high school athletics.
Contact the winning team of attorneys at Hollis Wright if you need help after an accident.
Our law firm proudly supports Alabama high school athletics as well as the AL.com Hollis Wright Player of the Week.
Be sure to go vote this week for your favorite player at the Hollis Wright AL.com fan poll.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Appreciate you joining us each and every Sunday evening. Before we get back into the conversation, reminder of how you can join this conversation. You can text us, area code 205-670-1949, or toll free 844-529-8255. 844-LAW-TALK is that number. Josh?
All right, so Rodney, when we were going out to break, I talked about in this segment, we were going to talk a little bit about kind of probating an estate. Let's talk, if we can, generally first, before we get to that, about what assets fall inside an estate that someone may own versus those things that fall outside the estate.
Okay. Well, so you have, two types of assets. You have probate assets and you have non-probate assets. Probate assets, things like your real property, things like automobiles, all types of physical property that's solely in your name. You also have non-probate assets, which are assets that can be passed to you outside of probate. So things like life insurance policies. If you are a beneficiary, you can be designated, and that can go outside of probate. Bank accounts. Also, if you have a payable on death account, the assets in that account can pass to a beneficiary outside of probate.
Yeah, so talk just a little bit about that. It sounds like, take the concept of having a will out of it. There are some things that you can control through how you set some of these things up that allow you to make sure that the resources go to the right people at the time of your death. You just mentioned a couple of them, one of which is, for example, just a regular bank account where you can have a payable upon death account where that account moves from, for example, if a husband passes away, directly to the wife.
Right. Another, of course, very popular example is life insurance.
Yeah.
All of us should have a life insurance policy. And when you set that policy up, of course, one of the things that you're going to do is designate beneficiaries. And so once you do that, the proceeds of that policy actually pass, to those beneficiaries, regardless of, whether or not you have a will set up.
Yeah. So one of the things we see a lot is we'll see someone that has, for example, a life insurance policy where they have established a series of beneficiaries to divide that life insurance policy to them at the time of death so that the family has resources in order to be able to handle and manage the burial process, handle and manage kind of financially when a loved one has passed away. And so there's some things you can do outside of even a will that allow the majority of your assets or some of your assets to be able to go directly to heirs without hitting the probate estate. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is explain, if you will, these probate assets, and you listed some of them. How does someone go about getting access to those through the court system in a probate process to make sure that they're properly allocated to the heirs?
That's a good question. Whether or not a person leaves a will, someone will have to go to the probate court and file documents. One is called a petition for letters of administration if there isn't a will. If there is a will, there's a petition for letters testamentary. And these are documents that you file with the court, asking for the court to give you permission to transfer this deceased person's assets to the correct beneficiaries.
And the court will kind of walk you through that process, won't they?
Yeah, they will. It's a court-supervised process, the probate process, and so there are rules and laws to determine who gets what, depending on whether or not you do have a will in place. If you do have a will, of course, that person will need to follow the terms of the will in distributing those assets. But if you don't have a will, there is state laws that are in place that will determine who the beneficiaries are of that estate.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, David, that I think is important too, and I think Rodney will agree with this, is one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your estate is to determine who is going to be in charge in a will circumstance, who's going to be in charge of helping manage and resolve conflict, meaning who will be appointed ultimately as the executor of your estate. That's an important process to make sure you got the right person. Because a lot of times with families, Rodney alluded to this, sometimes as much as everybody loves each other, there are folks in the family that are going to cause drama, conflict that can impact the estate probating process. You want to make sure that that executor that's appointed in your will is someone that is objective and fair and is not subject to political pressure one way or the other in a family, to make sure that things are done legally and through the court system and managed efficiently.
Is that a professional individual or is that an actual family member?
Great question. I know Rodney can answer it for us.
So your executor can be whoever you decide. It can be a professional or it can be a family member. But like you said, you do want to make sure that it's someone who is going to, do a good job with handling your assets. And so, as a fiduciary, you do have a duty of care. You have a duty of loyalty, and so you have a duty to not, number one, do any self-dealing, do anything with the estate, to get some sort of selfish or financial gain for yourself. You have to be prudent, when you're handling these assets. And so you have to, marshal the assets, gather all of the assets, give an accounting of these assets. If there are any debts that have to be paid, making sure that those debts are paid off. And so those are some of the duties that you have as a fiduciary when you are appointed to manage someone's estate.
Yeah, it can be stated over and over and over again, the importance of making sure if you're going to have somebody in your family that manages that, they need to be a mature, responsible, objective adult that can handle being hammered by all sides of the family to make sure that it's done correctly and legally. And that's not always as easy as it sounds.
No, it's not.
And a lot of times what happens is someone passes away that was, if you will, a matriarch or a monarch of the family that was kind of that rock in the family, and someone else has got to kind of take that process over to make sure that those assets are properly distributed fairly and legally.
Rodney, do you advise, those are tough conversations to have, right? No one wants to talk about mom or dad passing and that sort of thing. But do you advise just someone in the family, as maybe you see some diminishing health or some signs, maybe begin those conversations of, well, what happens, the what if conversation?
Definitely. I think what a lot of people do is wait until it's too late to have these conversations, and I definitely try to encourage my clients that this is something that you want to be talking with your kids, with your family members about your wishes, what you would want to happen in certain situations. And it is a tough conversation to have, but it's a very much necessary conversation to have.
Yeah, and this is, Rodney, this show is a great example of, it's worth the time when you see those moments happen in life and there is diminishing health, or it's just time to have that conversation, to be able to say, hey, we got this guy in Birmingham, Rodney Davis, who's awesome at this. Why don't we go sit down with him or have him come to us and talk a little bit about this process and some of the things that we can do to make sure there are no issues when it's, when there is declining health or someone does pass away. And so this is a perfect example. This is the process of estate planning, and it's why you'd want Rodney involved in this thing.
You say a lot about don't bury your head in the sand. This is a perfect scenario 100%. Where you just, it's going to happen. We're going to pass, right? So you just can't, it's not just going to go away.
That's right. We're going to talk a little bit about, when we get back from break, we're going to talk a little bit about estate litigation, if there is conflict, how that's resolved, how the courts resolve those things. We'll talk a little bit about those when we get back.
All right, let's step aside. This is our final break of the evening. If you're waiting for the opportunity to pick up the phone and give us a call, you got just a few minutes remaining. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. As with any industry, it's important in the legal world to hire an attorney that is knowledgeable and has a track record of success. But with so many attorneys out there and so many different types of cases, how does someone decide the right lawyer to hire? In this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, what should I consider in hiring an attorney? In-state versus out-of-state, big firm or little firm, recommendations from friends or family, the internet, the phone book, or TV. With so many choices and so much information, it can be an overwhelming task trying to make the right decision. To complicate things, choosing a lawyer is an important and sometimes life-affecting decision and should not be taken lightly. So how do you select an attorney? First, do your research. Look the firm up on the internet. Learn about the cases they handle and the results they get. Second, find out what clients are saying about the firm. Many websites provide client testimonials or have a star ranking system. Use those to your advantage. And finally, talk with a lawyer from their office and ask them questions. Questions about the volume of cases they handle. Do they return phone calls? Are you just a number or a client that gets the attention you deserve? Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
Welcome back into the attorneys. Just a few minutes remaining, about 6 minutes or so. So if you want to take advantage of that opportunity to speak with attorneys from Hollis Wright, you got about 6 minutes to give them a call. Josh?
All right, so Rodney, I get a lot of questions about, hey, so-and-so's not doing what they're supposed to in the distribution of our assets consistent with the will. How do I handle that? What do I do? Who do I go to? How is that generally handled? If there's some dispute in the estate after someone passes, how is that managed?
If you're a beneficiary or if you're an interested party to this estate, one thing you can do is file a claim with the probate court. If you have an issue with how the executor or how the personal representative is handling the assets, then as a beneficiary, you have the right to, to file a claim with the court and have that issue handled in court. And I would definitely, recommend that you, contact an attorney to handle something like that.
The judge will generally work a lot of this stuff out through a process where there is evidence presented, there are rulings, you can have a trial. I mean, there are a lot of ways to dispute an estate. Rodney made a good point that it generally has to be someone that is an interested party, which is a beneficiary or somebody that benefits from the estate itself. And that's not always as easy as it sounds to figure out who those people are, because sometimes there are people that claim that they're a beneficiary to an estate, but they're not technically in the estate, and they didn't receive any beneficiary assets, but they believe they are for the following reasons: a will that wasn't probated, or the wrong will was probated, right. Those types of things. So you want to get to a lawyer in those circumstances. Talk with us just for a moment about the importance, though, of the difference between dying with a will and dying without a will, because that happens a lot.
Right. So if you pass away and if you don't have a will, the state of Alabama has sort of what I like to think of as an estate plan already in place for you, and it's called the Laws of Intestate Succession. And what it is a plan that the state has put into place that sort of does the guesswork and determines who will get your assets if you pass away without a will. Now, the problem with this is that most of the time, it's not what you would want for your own estate. And so it's important that you have a will in place for you to determine, how you want your assets to be disposed of, who you want your assets to go to.
Yeah. The concept of estate distribution gets really complicated because a lot of times it depends on, for example, if you die without a will, whether or not you passed and only biologic children of yours and the person that passed away are still alive? What if there are stepchildren? What if there are divorces involved? So the distribution of assets without a will a lot of times can be really inconsistent with what your intent was. You have the opportunity to go meet with someone like Rodney, just sit down, free consultation to evaluate whether or not a will is an important component to your estate, and I'd highly recommend it. It's just super important for everybody, even for those people who don't think they have tremendous assets to be distributed. You'd be surprised what you actually have when you live an entire life.
I mean, for individuals, it makes sense, but especially I would think if you're a business owner. We had a question, and we only have about under 3 minutes remaining, but about a business owner that wanted to make sure that the business, if he passed, it ends up, with who he wants it to. Is it more complicated if you're a business owner and want to do something like this?
It can be, definitely. When you think about it, you have a business, you have, a whole another set of assets and decisions that have to be made for a whole different entity. And so it's definitely important to have a good business plan into place to decide, what's going to happen with that business.
Kind of a succession plan.
Exactly. Exactly. It's definitely important to have a plan in place for your business as well to decide, who's going to handle what aspects of the business if something were to happen to the owners, and as well as who the business is going to pass to when that owner passes away.
And a lot of times what we see individual family members are running that business. So, making sure that there is a directive and a plan of who's going to take that business over if you pass away is super important, because you can imagine the argument and the infighting that sometimes can happen among family members and siblings who want to run that business. If you've established that on the front end, you don't have to worry about those things.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, we've got about 1.5 minutes remaining, but I want to give both of you the opportunity for a final thought. And Rodney, if you would, you please go first.
Well, definitely, if you are an individual, if you're an adult, I definitely recommend having an estate plan. And you need to at least have a will, an advance directive, and a durable power of attorney. This is going to save your family so much confusion, so much heartache, and it's a gift that you're going to give to your family members.
Yeah, and I mentioned at the beginning of the show how I think this is an important topic. We do a lot of shows, David, on wrongful death and personal injury and things that our firm does a lot of. But we also think shows like this are super important, because there are a lot of people that are watching this show right now that are saying to themselves, I don't have a will. I never thought I wanted to spend the money or the time or the effort to do it. Hopefully this show will shake them up a little bit to say, it's not that expensive. It's easy to sit down with someone like Rodney and to be able to evaluate certain things you want to make sure are protected and managed correctly at the time of your passing. So hopefully this show will explain to some people that there are some estate planning options that you need to make sure that you manage.
Really helpful conversation.
Great job, bud. Thanks for being on.
Appreciate you guys being with us. Thank you so much, and thank you as well. We're always grateful for your time here with us. As we wrap things up, the numbers on your screen, get in touch with the firm of Hollis, Wright. They'll be glad to speak with you. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis, Wright.